In this video, we'll be taking a look at a Sunfire V440 enterprise server from 2003. I'm slowly but surely building out what I'm calling the retro rack, hosting mostly early 2000s enterprise networking equipment and servers. The rack is pretty network heavy at the moment, supporting several branch office configurations, even one over a T1 line. But there isn't any compute power on the network, and this V440 is going to change that. This 4U monster has 4 UltraSpark 3i processors inside and enough RAM to make your 2003 self drop your jaw in disbelief. Today we're going to be having a look around this thing and see what it's all about, do a little home lab rail kit modification work to get this thing all racked up, and finally install Solaris, Sun's Unix variant that would have been running on this thing in 2003, all over a JumpStart server. We'll get a Solaris 10 VM in my proxmox instance running in my more modern rack, networked up with the retro rack, and install Solaris over the network onto this V440. Let's get into it. This is a Sunfire V440 rack mountable server from 2003. The V in the name denotes that it was what Sun considered an entry to mid-level server in their lineup. But Sun stuff wasn't cheap back then. This thing in its current configuration would have set you back around 26,000 US dollars in 2003 when it came out, or roughly 45,000 US dollars adjusted for inflation here in 2025. And it's pretty big. This thing is a 4U server. A U is short for rack unit, and a single U is 1 3/4 inches tall. So for example, here's a little Cisco 2600 series router. It is 1U tall, and of course 4 of these is the height of this big 4U V440. But it's massive in all respects, not least of which is its weight. I think it clocks in at something like 80 pounds. And I bring up all that rack sizing and U stuff because I'm building what I'm calling my retro rack in the other room. But it's really network heavy. I've got a pretty sophisticated network built out, running what I'm calling these branch offices and exploring different network technologies, but I don't have any compute power in that rack. Sure, I've got plenty of servers, but they're not on the network I've been building out, and I think this is going to be our first foray into getting some serious compute power in the retro rack. And when I say I'm racking this thing up, I'm not kidding. I have a rail kit for it, which is exceedingly rare. A viewer named Jordan reached out many months ago and sent me this for the cost of shipping. I think it was like 30 US dollars, which is a screaming deal. In my opinion, we should be able to rack this up right under its little brother, a V240, which happens to be running some very interesting software. The Sunray server software for Sun's thin clients, they're called Sunrays. Those also aren't on the network yet, but we will be doing that in a future video. It's always a nightmare to find rails if you're collecting these big enterprise machines. The rail kits on these things almost always get discarded when these things are surplused after their service life is over. And you can see on the top of the lid here, it's got the nice diagram about how to rack it up with the rail system and everything. We're going to do that later. And I'm sad to say these Sunfires are retro indeed. They don't use the typical architecture for their CPUs that we're used to. They use UltraSpark, or the Spark architecture. Specifically, this thing has 4 UltraSpark 3i processors inside of it, and they aren't x86. These things are meant to run Sun's Unix variant at the time called Solaris, which supports the Spark architecture. These CPUs I was showing you. This one's got 4 of them inside in these very interesting modular bays that we'll dig into. And it's interesting for me as a, enterprise server novice, because you can't just throw, Windows Server 2003 on here or whatever. You need to run an operating system that supports the architecture, and that would be Solaris. So let's start by getting a little look around this thing. We'll look at the front, we'll open up these panels, there's a hard drive bay here, some PSUs over here. We'll look at the back, and then we'll take the lid off, pull out a bunch of modules, and see what this thing's all about, and eventually we'll fire it up. We'll start at the front. We've got the really nice Sun Microsystems badge, of course the Sunfire V440 badging as well. Got probably a CD-ROM, no, DVD-ROM drive in there, accessible from the front. I think that one might be broken. We'll probably find out. A lock for the front panel, and then some indicators. So this is the machine's up, the machine needs service, or something's wrong. And this is a identifier indicator, so you can remotely turn this on, and there's a matching one on the back. Remember, you'd have hundreds of these racked up, and you might be remoting into one, trying to figure out what's wrong. From the console, the server console, that'll show you how you control these things. You can tell it, turn your indicator on, and then you go to the rack with 20 of these in there, and you know which one you should be messing with. I'm going to open up these doors, and this is my least favorite part of the machine. I think, as you'll see, we'll get into it, very, very well built, but these plastic clips that hold this in, that one's not so bad. Open that door. This one's really, really tight. And there they are. It's not that they're low quality plastic, they're just very hard. And eventually, they're just going to break. These are not long for this world. I think mine are probably in better shape than some. Now, you have to imagine, these were designed to be opened tens of times over the course of this thing's life. You know, maybe a power supply goes out, maybe a drive goes out. So I'm not really knocking the machine, but this is the one thing I can tell is going to break on this machine someday. With the pod bays open, we get our first glimpse inside the machine. You could put 4 drives in here. And of course, they're on these Sun sleds, these caddies. I've got a single Sun branded 146 gig. I think it's Ultra 3 SCSI. This one's dated 2007. I think this thing went end of life, meaning they weren't making it and they weren't supporting it very much longer in 2007. I probably got this from a different machine, or, you know, who knows. A longtime friend of the channel, Andy, donated this in, I want to say, September of 2023, so I've had it quite a while. And in fact, I have another one, which is more of a parts rig. This one has all 4 CPUs, and the other one has everything except the CPUs. Literally these UltraSpark 3i's that I need to scrounge up on eBay. And if you're worried about me touching this one is totally toast. This is a bad CPU. Down in here, we've actually got the power supplies. You plug in the power on the back, but it gets routed up to these guys. One can fail, the machine will still run. I'm only ever going to use one today. I assume they're hot swappable. We can probably learn about that on the lid diagram. Let me zoom in on this screw. This one's clearly been in and out a couple times for whatever reason. Pretty gummed up. Here's the one on the right, the other one. You can see that's pristine. Perhaps has never been pulled. That's what that's supposed to look like. I guess we'll pull this one today, just for fun. We'll pull this one out, so you get in there and turn that screw left, of course. Several rotations. I think it'll spin. Yeah, it actually has a stop. I was going to say I thought it would kind of release and be captive and spin forever, but it actually does stop. And then, let me not jam my CD-ROM, my DVD-ROM. You can pull this big boy out. Pretty impressive unit. Here's the 3.5-inch hard drive for scale there. You can just make it out. It's got the word top stamped into the metal there, so you don't mess that up. Massive multi-pin connector on the back to plug into some power backplane thing. Manufactured by Delta Electronics. They were a big producer of these things, and I think Sun used them pretty heavily. Max power output 680 watts, and it can take 100 to 240 volts AC in, which is really nice. I actually have 240 volt service in the room that the retro rack is in, and in future videos I'm going to extend that and get it closer to the rack so we can start using that. And then, just in case it's your first day on the job, they stamped bottom into the bottom, right into the metal. Just above the right power supply, we have another Sun Microsystems oddity. This is the SCC, or System Configuration Card slot. You can see I've got a card in there. And basically, it holds like the MAC address of the built-in network interface and some NVRAM settings for this thing's equivalent of a BIOS, which we'll look at when we boot it up. And a Sunfire will not boot without a valid card inside. So if you're picking one of these up on eBay or wherever, if it doesn't have a card, I wouldn't even buy it. I don't know. Maybe you can find aftermarket cards, but if you're just trying to mess around and have a little fun, make sure it has the card. Now, I've never seen one that didn't. They're always locked down. This one has some special lock on it. Sometimes they even have like a zip tie going through it so that you can't pull it out, but you're definitely going to want that in there. I think the idea was that you could have a machine go bad, you know, some catastrophic failure on the motherboard or something, buy another one from Sun, take out your old card, put it in the new one, and you'd have the exact same configuration you had on this one. You'd be back up and running. Even the MAC address would be the same on the network interface that I'll show you on the back there when we turn this thing around. And then next to the card is the actual power switch. So you pull this panel open and you can power this up physically like that, or hold it and shut it down, I think. And another lock, I think you can actually stop the machine from booting if you put this in the lock position. So that's another thing to watch out for. Now, my initial plan here was to load this thing up with drives and do a fresh Solaris install. But I want to say in a very old Patreon video, I installed either Solaris 8 or 9 on this thing. So I think what we're going to do is actually just boot it up and maybe avoid a Solaris install headache. I'm getting pretty adept for someone who is not a Solaris IT administrator, like 20 reps under my belt or something, but we'll boot it up later and see what's on this drive. And I don't think these clips really come across on camera, but it's not good. They're gonna break. Flipped it around. Let's take a look at the back. On the left side here, we've got AC power in for both power supplies. We've got the same indicators we saw on the front. This is that indicator light you can turn on remotely. So one on the front and one back here turns on so you can find the machine in the rack. We've got a maintenance warning icon, and then I think that's just a general activity if the machine is powered up. We've also got indicators for each PSU. So we've got AC power going in, DC power going out just fine that the machine uses, a maintenance indicator, so something's wrong. And I don't actually know what this box sliding in indicator is. I'm going to go look that up. Looked it up. That means okay to remove, and it will only indicate if the other power supply is also fine. So in what's called the advanced lights out management, the management software that you can configure this thing with, you can tell it you're going to take out a CPU. This will indicate that it is okay to do so, and then you can hot swap and reactivate your spare. Moving further along, we've got a regular old serial port, 4 USB ports, probably USB 1.0. Pretty swanky for a enterprise server in 2003, in my opinion. 2 onboard network interfaces, 10, 100, and 1000 megabit, which was also really good for 2003. These are the MAC addresses that are in that card I was showing you, the system configuration card. And so you could pull that card out of one machine, put it in another, and these would assume those MAC addresses. External SCSI for an external disk array or something. Moving further right, we've got 5 PCI slots, and it looks like 366 megahertz and 333 megahertz PCI slots. Tons of expansion capability here. And this is another interesting oddity of this particular machine. This is its remote management card. I think SC stands for system controller, and you need this. This is how you like get an operating system on this thing and control it and mess around with it. So I guess my advice would be, if you're buying one of these, V440s anyway, make sure it's got its system control card. This card is actually like another computer inside the computer. It's hosting that ALOM, the Advanced Lights Out Management, and we'll connect to it over this RJ45 port, but you can see it's labeled Serial Management. That's actually a serial port using the RJ45 connector, so we can use a serial RJ45 cable like this, and we'll be able to talk with this thing. And you can also set it up so that you can remote into it over a network. Maybe we'll set that up too. That's another thing that'll trip you up if you're new to enterprise servers. They usually aren't going to have a video card. You're going to be interacting with it over serial with something like this ALOM or system controller thing. Serial, again, is just, this port here. That's just a different form factor. It's very rare that, well, these days I think it's pretty common that you'd have like a VGA port. Compaq was doing that big time around this time period. But Sun and a lot of other enterprise gear, it was just a waste of money to put a video card in an enterprise server because it doesn't need a video card. It's hosting things, it's using the network. Video isn't an aspect. At least back in 2003, GPUs are a big deal now. And on the lid, we've got a really nice diagram going over the machine. In fact, I'm seeing now I did not have to go look up what that icon I didn't understand about the power supply was, because it says it right here, okay to remove. It tells you exactly what that thing is right on the lid. This should be pretty easy. We've just got these 2 latches, and I think actually it says loosen top cover lockdown screw. Where's that? It's hiding behind the hard drive door, and the case points right to it, and it's labeled, of course. Mine was already loose because I've already taken this off in the past. Ugh. So I don't actually remember with that screw out. I guess it just lifts up then? Yeah. Nice and easy. Pretty impressive. Here are the modular CPU and RAM slots. So RAM and a CPU is on each of these boards. We'll pull them out. Got the nice sun purple color they were using back in that time period. Let's pull one of these out. They're labeled C0, 1, 2, and 3. And you release these spring-loaded screws on either side, just like that. And I'm guessing the green means do not do this while the machine is on. Usually enterprise machines will have an orange or a red, meaning it's safe to hot swap it. And it's got these nice latches. Forces the board out of its slot. Here's what these modules look like. A feat of engineering in and of themselves, I think you'll agree. Each can hold 4 sticks, I believe, of DDR RAM. I think what we've got here is 2 gig sticks, meaning each module is 8 gigs for a grand total of 32 gigs in the machine, which would have been astronomical back then. And then we've got the UltraSpark 3i processors under these big heat sinks. Here, I've pulled these out. I'm 100% sure I have all 4 modules with CPUs. I'm less sure about the RAM, so we'll check that. But you'll just have to believe me that under these heat sinks are some of these. See what kind of RAM we're dealing with. There is a chance I pilfered some RAM from this thing. 1 gig DDR 266 sticks. Okay. So that means across all 4 modules, assuming they're populated, I'm going to check all the RAM. We probably have 16 gigs of RAM in this machine. That's not enough to build my retro compute cloud. Always remember, a cloud is just your stuff running on someone else's computer. That one's full. Okay, I'm going to check all these. This is how you put them back in, by the way. They latch in. It's very nice. You push those down, inserts it into the slot. There's no question about whether it's seated. Very nice design. Let's check the second one. Fully populated. The last one, fully populated. Okay, that is good. I probably didn't steal from this machine because I probably wanted 2 gig sticks for other machines. That's making more sense now. Assembled in Canada for all the Canadian viewers. Well, before we fire this up, the only other thing to show is here's that system control card. Remember, it's kind of a computer on a computer. It's hosting the ALOM, the Advanced Lights Out Management. We're going to fire this thing up and terminal serial console into this and see what we can see. Sun spared no expense, ever. Did this really need to be a captive, like, thumb screw on this riser interconnect board? Like, did this board go bad so often that a tech was going to come in here and do that? Or am I misunderstanding what this is? Let me know. Power is ready. I've got a serial console cable going into the serial management of the system controller card over to my machine just to the side there. And depending on how I left this configured, about a year ago, the last time I played with it, we're either going to give it power and we'll hear the power supply and the system controller card will start up and everything will be cool, or it might be configured to just attempt to boot and it'll rip the whole machine on and the fans will go crazy and this thing's pretty loud. So let's see what happens. I'm seeing a light PSU 0. I don't hear any fans. I think I left it in a reasonable state, and the serial console came right to life. That's good. We can see the ALOM post, and it is initializing. First thing it showed was the ALOM Bootmon version 1.5, apparently, and it's doing some very basic tests, and now it's on loading runtime image and just sitting there. I can't remember how long this takes, so I'll be back in a moment. Hopefully it's not stuck. A couple minutes later, it's up. Please be admin. Oh man, root admin. I have no idea what I set this to. I'm gonna go look up the defaults, which are hopefully what it is still at. Okay, I'm starting to think I never knew the password to this ALOM and I've probably never reset it. Let's consult the diagram. There are different layers to how you interact with these Sunfires. Layers of management. The ALOM is like this system controller that allows you to remote in from different locations over the network. I'm in the room with the machine, but typically that's not how an administrator of a server farm would be operating. They might be in a totally different building, a different state, a different country. So they need the ALOM to get in remotely and interact with the machine. There's a lower layer of management called the Open Boot PROM, or the OK prompt. You can see right here it says serial line login timeout. I can press #dot to get back to the ALOM. Now usually when you're stuck here and you press enter, you get something called the OK prompt, which is the firmware, the BIOS of one of these things, as it were. That's not happening because I'm pretty sure I need to power the machine on now to get to this box in the lower right corner. And I suspect none of this is making any sense. I have to refresh my memory on it every time. We're gonna boot the machine up. We're gonna let it power all the way up. I don't think I explained that OK prompt and ALOM stuff very well, so I'm gonna take another stab at it. It's pretty critical to being able to understand how to manage and interface with these Sunfire machines. To draw some comparisons and make some examples to kind of allow us to picture the architecture and all the different pieces in our head, we're going to take a look at this IBM X3650 M2 Enterprise machine from 2009. This guy is running plain old Xeon Intel processors. It's the x86 architecture. You could install Windows on this guy, and as you could imagine, when you plug this in and power it on, you get a BIOS, the screen with all the menus and everything that we're used to. You can configure boot options, stuff like that. That BIOS is the equivalent of this thing's OK prompt that we were looking at. And now it wouldn't surprise you if I told you, you plug this in but don't turn it on, there's no BIOS coming out of the screen. It's the same story with the OK prompt. You can only get to the OK prompt when the machine is powered on, just like an x86 traditional BIOS. But if we look on the back of this IBM unit, it's got a remote management port. This is what IBM calls the IMM, or Integrated Management Module, and it is the equivalent of our ALOM. I can plug this machine in, don't have to power it up. I can remote into here, and there's actually a web interface where you can do things like turn the machine on, turn it off, and configure some other stuff. So the OK prompt in the Sunfire world is just the equivalent of a BIOS. Of course, there's some subtle differences, but it's the right way to think about it, in my opinion. And the ALOM on this thing is just like any other remote management module you might have on an enterprise computer. As long as the computer's plugged in and you have the password, you can access the thing. IBM had these IMMs on these things for a while. Dell's got the iDRAC, HP has one. Pretty typical setup there. But if we look back at the unholy trinity here, what the Sun documentation guys were trying to tell us is it's a little bit more of an ecosystem in the Sun world, and it's very command line based, a console environment. So what this thing is trying to tell us is that we can actually maneuver between these in the same console. Later in the video, for example, you'll see we can actually maneuver between the OK prompt and the ALOM as long as the OS isn't booted. We can maneuver between the OS and the ALOM. So it's definitely more of an ecosystem, and the computer is sort of tightly integrated with all its components, whereas I think you could argue some other enterprise gear is a little more loose. In fact, you'll see we're going to boot into Solaris eventually, and that's actually how we reset the ALOM password from the OS that Sun would have provided with this machine. So hopefully that makes a little more sense. You at least know what the OK prompt is. It's the BIOS machine has to be on, and this was my long-winded way of saying, let's go power this machine on. I'm literally going to reach in and I'm going to press that power button I was showing you, and it's going to get loud. Here it is with noise canceling. Very nice to be around. Right away, we can see some stuff coming out on the console. We've got a host system reset. It's actually going off and looking at the physical stuff to see if everything's fine, the PCI bus and the memory and the CPUs. Here it goes, looking at everything. It's actually doing a memory test. Now the ALOM, you don't have to do any of this stuff. You can tell it to boot up remotely later, but I don't know my ALOM password, apparently. So we're going to get into the OK prompt. And there we go. Like I was saying, we're at something called the OK prompt. We're going to spend a lot of time with this ALOM and this OK prompt and everything. I don't think I can reset the admin password from here. So with this level of access, I can install Solaris on the machine, but I'm hoping I already did that. So we're going to issue a boot and see if I configured this to just boot from that disk we were looking at earlier. And once it boots up, assuming I have Solaris on there, I should be able to reset the ALOM password. Not that any of this really matters, because as you can see, I can interact with the machine already, but I'm surprised I hadn't reset the password previously. So that caused a reboot. It did all its checks again, and it says it's rebooting with the command boot. It thinks it found a disk. Well, let's see. It's not a bad level of noise. So you know how some fans just sound terrible, and it's like an absolute nightmare to be around them? This one's loud, like the decibel level is loud, but it doesn't like drive you insane, if that makes sense. So for whatever reason, I had installed Solaris 10. You can see it saying SunOS Release 5.10. That is another name for Solaris 10. That's not quite what I want on this machine. So I think we're going to install Solaris 8 or 9 on it. That would be more error appropriate. And of course, we have another login that I'm sure I've forgotten. So let's try root and one of my usual suspects here. Okay, I'm in. So this thing is running a copy of Solaris 10. Let's shut it down. So back to our diagram, you can maneuver yourself between these different firmware layers on the command line. So I'm going to do pound dot, and that takes me back to the ALOM. And I don't know the password for that thing. So that's why it's kind of nice to know the password for the ALOM, because you can kind of maneuver back and forth, which is kind of nice. And now I'm stuck. I gotta wait for it to time out. So I'm gonna power this thing off manually. I think I can just hold that. And it's a little quieter in here. So I don't want Solaris 10 on this thing. That sucks. I don't know the ALM password. That sucks. But I do know that I can get into the console port and I can interact with it, which means this thing is healthy enough to rack up and get out of this room, and we will proceed from there. Let's check out this rail kit. I don't think it's new, but it should be complete. So that's good. Maybe it's new. I guess we'll find out. This is one of those things where I'd been every time I looked at this box, I was like, I really need to get around to that project. But as you can see, it can be a little involved. And I hadn't decided exactly where I wanted to put the machine and what I wanted to do with it. I think I have a better handle on that now. Okay, I will unwrap all this stuff and lay it out. It's not new, but that's fine. We've got screws and everything. It is indeed a V440 4-post rack mount kit. These bigger units actually go in the rack, something like that, and you'd put it on either post there. And then these smaller ones bolt onto the machine, and I'm seeing, luckily, I actually have the screws. This was obviously racked at some point in its life, and someone was nice enough to put the screws back in, so the screws go in there. I'm gonna do that now. Got this one on, and I'll put the other one on the other side. There's actually only one way they can go, so you can't really mess that up. And then I need to put these in the rack at the right spot. It's kind of odd because this is sort of in the middle, so I'm gonna have to plan ahead and do the right spacing for the machine that's above it, of course. And I'm gonna use traditional cage nuts and rack bolts, just like that, to attach these. A lot of people mention I should use rack studs. I've got some. The folks over at Rack Stud actually sent me some. Not sponsored, no money, nothing like that. They literally sent me an email and were like, hey, you'd probably really like these in your home lab. We'll send you a couple bags. I'm gonna save these for the modern rack. I have a bunch of plans to reconfigure that, and that's when I'll try these out. In the retro rack, I'm kind of going for a certain aesthetic, and that aesthetic was 2003, when you would have been using the usual cage nuts and rack screws. So we'll explore these in future videos. But I'm gonna go get these racked in there, and I'll try to film myself sliding this monster in, and you can laugh while I do that. I'm actually gonna do a little test run on the bench here. These things are really heavy, and so it's a good idea to have a good mental model of how the mechanism works before you're sitting there with it in your hands about to knock your rack over. So I think, if I'm looking at this right, see, I'm already not sure. That, something like that. I don't know. May have figured it out. Maybe not. I don't know. That is like really tight. That doesn't make any sense. See, this is why it's a good idea to mess around with this beforehand. I have bad news. I'm pretty sure the inner glides are wrong. This was obviously from a V440 rail kit. We could see it on the sticker on one of them, the sliding mechanism. It's got these plastic bumpers, and they're making sure that you're going to be aligned with these rollers, these guys here, that actually allow things to slide. The top of that roller is aligned with that bumper, and this space is too small for this glide, so it's supposed to just slide on and click, and this thing doesn't go on. So I think, unfortunately, this is from a different rail kit. This one's right, this one's wrong. I don't know if it means anything, but the one with the V440 sticker is made by a company called Jonathan. I think I've seen some other Sun rail kits from them before. And the inner rail kit is from a company called Qualslide. So I don't know if they mix and match, but that's another indicator that we've got a problem here. Of course, it screwed on just fine in these holes, so that's either a standard pattern or a standard Sun pattern, and this is for another Sun machine. So much for the racking adventure. That's a disappointment. These are not cheap on eBay. These guys want like 350 bucks for them or something. So I'll have to hunt down some inner glides, that's fine. Let's go throw this thing in the rack anyway. We'll just stack it on top of the computers like it was before. The plot thickens. I was digging through my rail graveyard. It's very often the case that the glides come attached to the computer, and this piece, the more sophisticated piece, has been thrown away. And I found a pair of glides from a massive big IBM P5 machine I've got, another 4U unit. They are also made by Jonathan at Rail Company. And check this out. They are a perfect fit. Get it in there, flip it around. They latch in exactly the same way. It's got this little detent thing there that hooks into a little clip on the guide. I'm not explaining this very well, but anyway, it fits, but critical issue, only this hole lines up. So it's got an IBM pattern hole set on there. So yeah, we're gonna do the right thing, and I'm gonna modify this thing. All I have to do is drill 3 holes in it. I'll do one of them, and then I'll try to slide them together here on the bench, see if it's gonna work. Let's see, I need a hole here. This hole needs to be moved a little bit right there. That's good for structural integrity. And then I need a hole right here. I'm gonna mark where each one is. Scientific precision. You know, we're doing a little home labbing. I'm gonna screw in the one I can, just like that. I can almost get that screw in. I wonder if it'll go just a little bit. I'll just make that hole. Nah, I can't. So I'm just gonna have to make that hole a little bigger. You know, that's good. And then I'm gonna transfer my marks, and I'll use a square or something up in the garage. Okay, I'm gonna go drill some holes right in the middle of these, the same size as that hole, and I'll transfer that to the other. I'll use this one as a template. I'll be right back. It keeps getting better. The end of the other one is all mangled. It's supposed to look like that. So I'll bang that back into submission as well. Not too shabby. We got the rails that came with the kit that aren't quite right on the top, and then the ones I drilled a couple holes into. You can see I wasn't actually measuring center up and down. I was using the old eagle eye. But the long and short of it is, I'm going to be able to get 3 screws in each side instead of 4. Good enough for me. Here's where I'm going to miss a screw. So you can see this black mark. That needed to be taken out to align with this. And when you're in this situation and you're coming in it with a hand drill, the drill bit just really wants to wander. I tried to ream them out with the drill bit. That drill bit's toast now, I think. So if I had like a drill press where I could hold these down, drill in with the drill press, I think I could have done it. But basically we're just going to skip the screw there. I'm not too worried because there's 2 right next to it. And we'll go from there. And here's one of our modified inner glides on. This screw is going to be missing because I can't quite ream it out. Don't quite have a small enough grinder. Don't have the right tool setup. But I think that's going to be just fine. I'm going to put the other one on. I'll do a little test run and then we'll walk it over to the rack. Folks, the saga continues. Test fit, going good. Rail is fine, but we have a problem. This is supposed to be more like right here, towards the front of the rack, which means the modified ones I put on were longer than they need to be, which means I need to cut off the end. Okay, so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do a little measurement here and see how much I need to take off. Okay, not a problem. Cut that little end off. Had to cut about 1.5 inches off. And now, this is the one that's too tall. They're pretty much the same size now. My guess is that this other one came from a different Sun V440 rack kit. I'm sure they had several iterations. Final test fit for this side, and much better. It's not perfect, but there's kind of the width of the rack. It's about as thick as this. I think it's going to be good enough. I think it'll look okay. And now I know I can always shave off more if I really, really want to. I've got the rails installed where I think they should go. I want the machine to be right under this one. In the documentation, they gave you a nice little template to show you exactly where they should go relative to the machine above it. But I had to measure, and I didn't really like the measurements I was coming up with, so we're going to hope for the best. We might have to shimmy this one up a little bit, and this is as far down as it'll go. This one probably is also as far down as it'll go, if I had to guess. So we might have to do some of that. We'll find out. Let's get it in there. I can't stress enough how badly this is gonna suck. The manual clearly states this is a 2-person job, for obvious reasons. Come on, guys. Oh my gosh, we're in. Okay. It's a little tight, but we've got space. Yeah, it doesn't go all the way. I kind of saw that coming. That's okay though. Problem is, did I get far enough to click into my rails? I did. So there, you can just barely see they're sliding. And I gotta be careful here, but they're gonna click. They just clicked. They're fully engaged. Look at that. That looks good. It's not fully flush. I needed to cut maybe another 1/2 inch off the back. But I can always do that someday, and by that I mean I am never going to do that. This is how it looks. Still looks cool, you'd never know if I didn't tell you. Wow, that was way more work than it ought to have been. But it's done. I'm gonna go have a beer. Cool down beers have been acquired and drank. So let's at least fire this thing up tonight. It's got Solaris 10, like you saw. I want Solaris probably 9 on there. There's no reason other than that's what someone would be running at that time. Of course, Solaris 10 is just fine. But well, let's fire this thing up and we'll try to reset the ALOM password. And we're gonna fire up enough of the infrastructure here to be able to do that in the other room. The critical piece is this terminal server. So remember how I was plugging in that console cable in the other room directly to the machine when I was physically located next to it. This one has an octopus cable coming off the back. I've got one of those plugged in to the ALOM card here, and I'm going to fire up just the pieces we need to start interacting with it, which I think is the terminal server, the router, our switch. So my computer in the other room can talk to this, which can then talk to this, if that makes sense. And then of course we'll turn this on. So I think that's this stuff here. Yes. Let's let that boot up and go have a look. I am going to look at this stupid lip I've created every time I come in here, but it's actually kind of nice. So like it wasn't all the way in. The V440 has these little clips that actually release the rail system and let you slide the machine out. This particular rail system on this one doesn't have that, so you'd have to kind of like, I don't think you're supposed to pull that. It's a really loose and nice rail system, but I suppose in some way it is kind of nice to be able to reach in here and pull it out. Look how smooth that is. I didn't even bother re-greasing it or anything. That is so cool. Oh, and if you're wondering why my bench is always dirty, I clean it all the time. It's these servers, they're absolutely gross, and so I have like ridges in the bench where I've cut into the finish, and the dirt just gets sucked into them. This is just from moving that V440 around, you know, a few times. So here what we're going to do is try to access the serial console, the ALOM console that we were using before with a local physical cable. But this time it's over my network, the network that the retro rack is hosting. So let's take a look. This means nothing has gone wrong. This can trip you up with the Sun machines. So I'm pressing enter, nothing's happening. And it's because I need to press pound dot. And here it's asking me to log in to the ALOM. So remember, you can move between the ALOM and the console. It was kind of stuck in console mode even though the machine is off. And of course, I don't know my login. So I'm going to go to the other room. I'm going to physically power the machine on so we can drop to the OK prompt. Then we're going to boot up to Solaris. And then I'm going to Google how to reset the password on this thing. I literally have to walk over there. And as expected, the host system has been reset. So eventually it's going to get to the point where we're at the OK prompt and we can boot to Solaris. I will tell you what. It is nice being able to use this machine, but not have to listen to it. So we're at the OK prompt, of course, and let's just tell it to boot. Solaris is up, and we're gonna CD into this special SBIN folder for the platform. And let's see where we're at. So yeah, I am such a Solaris novice, but in user platform and then a folder specific to this particular machine. Remember, it's a very integrated system. We probably have a bunch of stuff in here. There's this SC admin tool we're going to want to use. And so we're going to do SC admin user password admin. I think this is going to reset the admin user password. It is. I'm going to put this to something I'm going to remember. Okay, now remember, we can move from Solaris to the ALOM with pound dot. I'm going to issue that now, pound dot. Now, in the same console session, I don't know if that's the right way to phrase that, Solaris is running on the machine and I've moved over to be controlling that SC card on the back of the machine. And we're going to try admin and the password I just entered. And we are in. And I'm going to have to rename that host name, this prompt name it's giving me, because it sort of uniquely identifies where this machine came from. So I think we do help. Never had to do this before. Okay, issued the show SC command, and it's showing me that there's this SC CLI prompt, and it's set to some value. The default should be SC. So I'm going to issue the set SC command. I'm going to set that value to SC. And now we're back. Okay, and then if I do console, I think? Yeah, I'm back in Solaris, so I've moved around our triangle. All right, so now I can get into ALOM. That's good, I know the password. Let's get some more hard drives in this thing, and then we'll get Solaris 9 on it. I've been sitting here for a while debating the hard drive situation. This one on the left is the one that was already in the machine. It's got Solaris 10 installed on it. It was in that upper drive bay 0. It is a 146 gig Ultra 320 SCSI drive, 10,000 RPM. It's made by Fujitsu, but it's got the Sun branding on there, the FRU label. This label's like really nice. It's like glossy. Your fingernail slides across it, you know what I mean? And then I found 2 more drives that are identical in their sleds. I think these sleds were called Spuds back in the day for whatever reason. I left myself a note 2 years ago, apparently, so these are probably also originally from that machine. And then I found another one in its sled from the V120, and apparently it works. Always leave yourself notes. That was several years ago, I think. But this one is 72 gigs, so not quite the right match. Digging through my pile, I found 2 more 146 gig drives, so I can definitely pack all 4 in there. But I don't think I want to waste that much drive space on this operation. I'd like to set this up as a NAS and an application server for 2003-ish era, early 2000s applications. Lots of Java in our future. I certainly don't need a 146 gig drive even just for the Solaris install. So I went digging even further into my pile, and I found 3 18 gig SCSI drives. A viewer named Nico actually donated these semi-recently, along with a bunch of other hard drives, so a huge thanks to them. And here's what I'm thinking. If you imagine we're looking at the drive bay top to bottom of that V440, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put 2 18 gig drives in the top, 2 146 gig drives in the bottom. We're going to install Solaris on drive 0, and then after the install, we're going to set up a RAID 1 mirror onto this one, meaning one of these drives can fail and I won't lose my OS install. Then we'll decide what to do about these 146. Maybe we'll put them in a RAID 0 in one pool, depending on what I'm putting on there, or we might also do a RAID 1, meaning one of them can also fail. I think this might have been a typical setup that an administrator would have done. You certainly would want some sort of redundancy on your main drive, and these are going to be UFS, Unix file system setups. ZFS, which is very Sun, NAS, and Solaris centric, I don't think is in Solaris 9. I think it came out in Solaris 10. So I'm trying to do this kind of the way someone might in 2003. Let me know how far off the mark I am. So these 2 are already in good shape. They've got the drive sleds, and we're going to need to steal some sleds from these other 2. They just use a Torx bit, 3 screws on either side. And if you're worried about picking up a Sunfire and it doesn't have the sleds, you will need them to get them in the machine, but there's a 3D printed option as well. Let me go find one. Yeah, so right there, this is one that I 3D printed. Always leave yourself notes. This one is good, has Solaris 10, and is 9 gigs from August 2023, apparently. Anyway, I've used these 3D printed ones a ton. It's a really nice option if you can 3D print. So if you have that capability, don't worry too much about finding these online with your machine. I'll link down to that in the description. I suppose you would need some screws though. They must just be standard hard drive screws, because I didn't have screws when I needed to 3D print those. They're pretty simple. Just little plastic slides and then the little mechanism to pull the drive out. You of course don't actually need that in the 3D printed version. I almost forgot. There's also these Sun branded trays on the bottom. See, this one's all scraped up. You can barely make out that it says Sun. You don't actually need that either. You can just put the 3D printed one on. You don't need that. But I suppose for completeness in our V440, I'll throw this on my other drive. It's sort of fun and games for the first few until you realize a lot of people were standing up entire data centers and had to do this for days straight. It also seems like total overkill to have 3 screws on each side. But if I don't put them in, I'll just lose the screws, so at least I'll know where I've got some spares. And I'm seeing now none of my drives have this plate. This might be the only one I have. I don't know if that was either shipped with or a requirement for some other Sunfire variant, but we'll save that for another project because you don't actually need it. So I think we're good. Here's our big guys that are going to be on the bottom. And then these 2, these 18 gig drives, are untested. I don't actually know if they work. I have a couple extras if they don't, so we will find out. Well, let's go put these in the machine. Let's get our drives in here. So we've got the two 18 gig drives. This thing wants to wander by itself. Like I walk away and it comes out to about there. Do something about that. So we'll get our 18 gig drives in the top, and someday this rack will be full, and it's going to sound weird for me to say this, but I'm kind of going to be sad about that, because you get nice like workbenches when there's gaps in the rack and you can put your tools on there. Pro tip, open these up before you slot them in, because they want to be open before you drive them in like that. And then we'll put our big ones in the bottom here, and then we will pursue a Solaris install. Now, of course, I could just use the DVD-ROM, but that's no fun. We'll be doing it the professional way, which I've been dreading, because it's kind of a lot of work. I'm going to install, or attempt anyway, to install Solaris 9 over my network to that machine, and we're going to need something called a JumpStart server. This Dell R720 is hosting proxmox, and one of those VMs that it is hosting is a Solaris 10 VM that I typically use as a JumpStart server. Well, let me go tell you what that's all about. Here I am looking at proxmox, the GUI for that thing on that Dell R720. Proxmox is a hypervisor, meaning you can install proxmox on a physical machine, the Dell R720, and host a bunch of VMs. One of which is this guy right here, and I've called it Sol 10 x86. This is a Solaris 10 VM with the x86 architecture, so it's running on that Dell machine I was showing you. Eventually, Sun kind of capitulated and started making x86 architecture versions of Solaris. Well, let's boot this up and see how it's doing. Haven't fired it up in a while. Yeah, we got the Oracle branding on this one. It was no joke to get this installed, as I recall, several years ago, but it can be done. You can run Solaris 10 in your proxmox instance, and it's very useful, as hopefully we will see. Sun. It's sort of sad to think about what Sun could have been in a different financial situation. So here's one of the reasons I've been dreading this. You can see it's complaining a lot about it's out of space, file system full. I need to do a little maintenance on this VM. So we can log into the full like GUI. I do kind of like this one. It really kind of takes you back to 2010. So we're getting in here. Here we are in Solaris 10. So to put a visual to things, I guess, we're going to do most things over the command line, CLI. That's what we've been doing this whole time. But, you know, it was also this VM. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to like maneuver the mouse properly. Proxmox does not like this VM. This like right here is where my mouse gets stuck, even though what I'm trying to tell you is that I cannot actually get down to the launch button. But the good thing about Unix and Linux is you just, you do a little open terminal, and then you can do whatever you want. So I'm taking a look at my disk space on this VM, and it says it's at 62% capacity. And you can see I was messing around with Solaris 8 the last time I was using this thing. Long story short, I'm going to mount a Solaris 9 image on this thing, and then we're going to get it networked up with the retro rack. This is the interesting part. Bear with me. Sun Microsystems JumpStart was an automated installation system for Solaris that made it easier to deploy the operating system across many machines. Instead of manually installing Solaris on each system, you could set up a JumpStart server with all the configuration rules needed to push out a consistent hands-free install over the network. In a previous video, I set up another Sunfire as a dedicated hardware JumpStart server, but it's not doing so hot. I need to revisit that. And so we're gonna deal with this Solaris 10 VM in my proxmox instance. I have one piece of good news. I've set up SSH access on that Solaris VM. We don't have to deal with that GUI anymore. However, on my modern machine, it's complaining no matching key exchange method found, blah, blah, blah. So that is as simple as telling your SSH agent to, don't worry about that. And then of course it's asking for the password. And here we are, SSH'd into that Solaris 10 VM, which is much more ergonomic in my opinion. But we have a pretty big problem. ifconfig A is telling us what this thing knows about. Its IP address is a 192.168.1 machine. That is my home network in my modern rack with the ubiquity switches and all that. What we'd really like to do is get the retro rack, which is on a 10.0.0.0 network, talking to my JumpStart server in my proxmox instance. And the good news is I've got plenty of network interfaces on the back of the machine that's hosting the proxmox instance. In proxmox, you can pass through one of those physical interfaces to a VM, which means the VM can act as which it is physically connected to the retro rack. Now, I've done this before. It's called a bridge. You can see I've been messing around here in the past. I don't remember how to do it. That's not what this video is about. So I'm going to set this port as yet another 10.0.0.0. And when I figure that out in 3 hours, I'll be right back. I made a joke about 3 hours. It took about 1 hour. Not too shabby. This wire here on this interface on my modern Dell machine is going to the Solaris VM. I've passed it through. So as far as the Solaris VM is concerned, it's connected to this interface, and I suppose in reality it is. That yellow cable I was just pointing to in the proxmox server is connected right here. That's the other end of it, into the retro rack switch, meaning it can connect with the 10.0.0.0 network that this thing is hosting. Oh, and this is a classic Cisco Catalyst situation. This thing keeps falling off. Can't imagine why. I need to get better tape. One of the network interfaces on the back of the V440, it's got 2 of them. In the first one, it's connected to this blue cable right here. What this means is that this guy is on the same network as our Solaris 10 VM, which is going to act as our JumpStart server. Meaning, I can install any version of Solaris I wish over the network onto this guy, the network being this huge thing. So now we're going to give that massive V440 some power, and we should be able to boot it up and install Solaris over the network with a JumpStart server. Just to show you, I'm not making any of this up, but I suppose if you made it this far into the video, you're pretty invested. We're going to telnet in to the VXR. This is the router of the retro rack. So here we are at HQ router. I assigned that Solaris 10 VM from my proxmox instance in the other rack 10.0.0.50. We're going to ping it, and of course we can hit it no problem. So they are networked. The VM running in this machine right here can talk to the retro rack over here, meaning I can use it as a JumpStart server to install Solaris. The first thing we're going to do is ensure that those hard drives, all 4 hard drives I was showing you, actually work. So here we are terminaled in to the V440. The OK prompt has a command called probe_scsi_all, and what it's going to do is go look and see if it can find all the drives. And we're going to say yes, and it's trying. This might take a moment, so I'll be right back. And it appears to have found approximately 1.5 drives. So it sees the first drive, 18 gigs, an 18 gig drive. Any drive has a little less actual storage you can use on it. So it's saying 17,501 megabytes. And then it tried to look at the second drive and didn't like it and gave up. So you can see right here on the drive indicators, it doesn't even know about these ones. It sees 1 and 2. So and look at that. We've got an indicator on the bottom 2 now. So those contacts were dirty. Still nothing here. And that one, I didn't even pull it out. It could find that. Let's do a probe_scsi_all just to see. I think what's going to happen is it's not going to see this one. That's probably a bad drive. Take a look. It's totally legit to pull those drives out and put them back in while the machine is running. You can see it's complaining that it saw a few of them in and out. So let's do another probe_scsi_all and see what it has to say. I think it's going to see 3 out of my 4 drives here. Actually, it's erroring out and really not liking it. Unknown error returned by IOC. So I'm going to pull that drive that it didn't recognize physically with the lights, and we'll put another one in. This is interesting. Right before I turned the camera on, it did have an indicator here for the one that I think yeah, there we go. So both of these top ones it's having trouble with, and the bottom two are fine. That is kind of implying to me that, yeah, see it's back? That is kind of implying to me that this one's a little sketchy. But let's pull this one for now, and I'll replace that with another 18 gig drive. It is spinning, so it's funny, when you pull these drives out, it's warm, they get very hot. They're 10,000 RPM drives, so they're really moving. And when you pull them out, they're kind of still wiggling because the spindle inside, platters inside are still moving. It's very weird to hot swap some drives. So this one like powers up and moves, but maybe there's something physically wrong inside of it. And now I've pulled it, and we got 3 green indicators. I'm gonna go swap this out for another 18 gig drive. I've got what I believe is another 18 gig drive. Took the old one off this sled, and oh boy, get in there. Why does this one turn off whenever I'm messing around with that one? Maybe that's normal. Maybe they're on same banks or something. Let's wait a second. It's been a few moments. That cannot be good. Let's do another probe scuzzy all. Going to issue another probe scuzzy all, and I'm thinking we're gonna have to max this thing out with a bunch of healthy 146 gig drives because I have plenty of those. Let's see how this goes. It is so confused. It's only telling me about one of the 146 gig drives. Okay, we're gonna max it out for 146 gig Sun branded Fujitsu drives. I've never seen one of those go bad. The connectors in the back might be dirty. So you can see I've got all 3 lights here now, nothing here. So it really doesn't like these 2 18 gig drives. This light comes on and it sometimes recognizes this one and the other one it didn't like. These are pretty consistent down here. And as luck would have it, I am not making this up. This is the other rack, the top of the other rack. Let's put my contact cleaner down. And I had another 146 gig Sun branded drive in the sled sitting here. So, you know, that's the kind of life I'm living. We'll throw this one in and sled up another one. I suppose this machine deserves it. So this is an 18 gig that is not treating us well. This is that one I was just showing you that happened to be in the same room. We'll see if it likes it. Yeah, right away. Well, for a second, we got a green light. It's hard to tell which one's spinning up. We'll see. It only kind of sometimes recognize this one, so let's put a 146 in this one's place as well. Yeah, this is weird. Like, now this one's off, that one's off. Should I not be doing this? So we'll get this 18 gig out of here, and I've got my 146 gig here. And you should theoretically be able to swap those out, hot swap the way I was doing it with the machine on. And you could, you saw on the terminal, it was aware that that was happening. That could be an issue. I've seen problems in the past where a perfectly healthy drive isn't detected because the contacts on the other side in the machine are dirty. And so you kind of got to jam it in there a few times. I tried that a lot, and I think it just doesn't like these drives. They might be fine, in another machine, so I'll keep them and I'll make some notes for myself. And a question might be, why am I dealing with these real drives? Well, I've got like a blue SCSI or whatever. They don't have the same SCSI connector. And I don't think there's a lot of options on the market, the retro computing market, that are as fast as these. So if I'm wrong, let me know. I would love to slap a bunch of these in there and not have to deal with these actual old drives that have absolutely been through it. I mean, who knows how many hours are on any of these? Let me know. All 4 Sun branded 146 gig drives are in. And you can see earlier while I was messing with the hard drive, I powered it off from the OK prompt. I issued a power dash off, and it's asking me to return to the ALOM. So I'm going to do a pound dot, and I can do admin and then the password we reset this to earlier. And by that, I mean that password. This is a really nice oddity of the Sun stuff. Earlier, you saw me powered off with power dash off. If you're at the OK prompt, it's power dash off. I'm pretty sure it's power on no dash. I can hear it in the other room. Why would they put a dash in one and not in the other? It's ridiculous. I'm not going to explain this very well, but we're at the ALOM, the system controller. I can hear the machine ripping up in there, but we're seeing nothing. We have to go to console. And now you can see immediately we're getting all the messages about it booting up and trying to do its checks. Takes a while to get used to this stuff. The final test, do I have 4 healthy drives? We're going to issue a probe SCSI all. It's going to go look at the drives. It sees 2 of them. What does that mean? I think it was a connection issue, like a physical issue. So I literally banged all 4 of them in and out a few times after doing more contact spray. And you can see we've got all 4 146 gig drives. And it's also complaining maximum boot failures on host. So that's probably fine. This is a classic issue, maybe not with Sun, but with these SCSI 3 connectors inside the machine, they get dirty. And so it's hard to actually like clean that out. And you have to like put the drive in and out like 5 times. Those 18 gig drives, you know, they might have been fine. It might have just been dirty connectors. But as you can see, all 4 drives. Let's get to work. It's the next day, I powered everything up and the hard drives are still giving me trouble. So you can see I just issued a probe SCSI all and it sees all 4. But as I've been sitting here, it's complaining that hard drive 1 has been removed, even though I'm just sitting in here, no one's over there messing with it. And I actually realized I'd been talking about this drive numbering wrong. It actually starts at 0 at the bottom. So this is 0, 1, 2, and 3. And the drive giving me trouble right now anyway is drive 1. But a probe SCSI says it can see it every time. Drive 0 has never really given me any trouble, and that's actually all we care about today to get Solaris installed. So I'm going to set up the JumpStart server, and we're going to finally kick off that process. This is the Solaris 10 VM. It's going to be our JumpStart server. You can see I've mounted a CD-ROM of the Solaris 9 install media, and inside Solaris install media, there is a tools directory. If we take a look, there is this setup install server script, and I'm going to set up the most basic JumpStart server to do Solaris 9 I can. It can be very sophisticated. You can have them run scripts before and after on the machine, install programs, do all sorts of provisioning, but I just want to install Solaris. So we're going to say setup install server, and then we're going to tell it where I'd like to host the install media on this local machine. This is a folder I have. And what it's going to do is go off and make sure it can copy the entire Solaris installer onto the VM. And from there, I'll show you the very bare bones setup you can do to actually make it so another machine can install off of this one. So waited for that to complete, took like 20 minutes. It copied the install media over to this folder I've got on the machine called export install. And if we take a look in there, we can see there is a Solaris 9 install directory. Perfect. You have to set up a couple files for this to work. The first one is etc ethers. And you can see I already have some stuff going on in here. This is a mapping of a MAC address on the NIC to the host name you'd like to use. So you can see I've already jump-started this V440 in the past, and we'll have to change some network configurations. It was on a different network. This is the MAC address of the V440. You need to set that up in the etc ethers file of your JumpStart server. And in fact, that V440 is up and running, so we can say banner, and you can see the Ethernet address right here matches the one I've got sitting right here. So that's all good. Then we're going to take a look at etc hosts. And you can see I've already got an entry for a bunch of different machines. These are all the machines I've jump-started on this VM over the years. Now, we don't actually want our V440 to be on the 192 network anymore. That's my home network. We're done with that. I'm going to give the V440 a static IP address of 10.00.51. So we just do it just like that. And so now this machine knows to take the MAC address, map it to a host name, and now it can map this host name, V440, to the IP address. You don't have to use the name of the machine. I just do this to preserve my sanity and so I can remember what I'm looking at because I don't get into these files very often. What's going to happen here is we're going to tell the V440 from the OK prompt to netboot, and it's going to do something called a reverse ARP. It's going to blast out its MAC address onto the network. This machine, because we've configured it here, will notice, hey, I do know that MAC address and you should call yourself V440. And even further, it'll say also, you're going to get an IP address on this network. And then the install will commence. Back in the Solaris 9 install folder, there is a tools directory, just like I was showing you before. And I'll show you the very simplest way I've learned to set up a JumpStart server to treat the client correctly. We're going to do add install client, the host name, our host name is V440, and the architecture, which you can look up online. Ooh, it's warning me that no host name was found for address. I'm actually kind of glad that it complained about that. All right, so check this out. This machine is Sol 10 proxmox, but I also moved it to this new network. It's not on this old network anymore at all. So I think that's what that was complaining about. I think if we add it again, it's going to complain that it already has it. Okay, no, everything's cool. Let's try it out. Moment of truth. This is the V440, and we're going to say boot net dash install. It's going to perform its reverse ARP, and it's going to broadcast out on the network and say, hey, I'm this guy. Are there any JumpStart servers out there that care to listen to me? We shall see. It's rebooting, performing its basic checks. I think I have this thing set to a very, very basic level of checking. Booting with command bootnet install. It found a network. It thinks the network is up. Sometimes you will time out waiting for the server to respond. There we go. It's doing something. Took a few tries. It's been a while since I did this. I can't really remember what happens. There we go. So I think it found the JumpStart server and it's saying, hey, I'm this MAC address. I need an IP. Interesting. Cannot open kernel, Spark, v9 Unix. I'm going to go troubleshoot. Been doing a little more research and I'm pretty sure this V440 requires a very specific version of Solaris 9. It does support Solaris 8, 9, and 10, and maybe we'll just give up and put 10 on there. Looking at a data sheet from 2006, and it's saying you need Solaris 9.12.03. I believe what this numbering scheme is a version from December of 2003. The one I've got is quite a bit older than that, and the closest I can find is a 12.02, so December of 2002, which apparently is not okay for this machine. And it's sort of interesting, I found some Usenet posts from 21 years ago, people asking this same question, does Solaris 9.12.03 finally support the Sunfire V440, and so on. And certainly plenty of other folks having this exact same problem. So that's my hunch. All right, I give up. I found a copy of Solaris 9 from 2005, and it's corrupt or something. I can't set it up on the JumpStart server, so we're just going to install Solaris 10, and the irony is not lost on me that the machine already had Solaris 10 set up, but, you know, we'll get a fresh copy on there. So I'm going to go do this again. Oh, man, target directory is not empty. You're right. It's got all sorts of stuff in here. Let's do it again. This VM doesn't have enough disk space, so I can only have one client, one OS set up at a time. I really need to add another disk to this VM so that I can keep them all set up at the same time. So I just went off and deleted the old Solaris 9, and then I'm recreating the Solaris 10, and this takes forever. We're getting there. We're going to do that same thing where we teach this Solaris 10 copy that it has an install client called V440, so that should be done now. Back on the V440, we are going to try another bootnet install. It's going to restart, and I'll bring you back when it's trying to do the ARPs and talk to the server. It's trying to go find the JumpStart server, just like last time. This is always nerve-wracking, waiting for it to talk to that thing. And I think we're in. Let's hope we don't have that same boot file issue. It's getting its IP again. Remember, it doesn't know anything about all that. It reaches out to the JumpStart server to get all its configuration, its host name, its IP, and so on. That ominous maximum boot failures on host SC alert has shown up again. I think that's hopefully okay though. We're just going to ignore that. It's still requesting an IP address. This is taking forever. Luckily we have a little spinner there. And I think that's a good thing, trying to get us all set up with an installer that it'll show us shortly. Over in Proxmox, here's the network traffic graph for our JumpStart server VM, and yeah, we got a lot of network activity going on. It was really taking forever there, just sitting there, so I actually restarted it with bootnet-v for verbose output, and this is really nice. It tells you the IP address it was assigned, the root server, so the JumpStart server that it's talking to. Oh, and as I'm sitting here, it's actually finally getting into an installer, I think. That took 15, 20 minutes, I think. I wonder if I've never done this over a 100 megabit link. Maybe I was always using 1 gig links. We'll have to get some 1 gig service in the retro rack. I've got all the gear for that, just haven't gotten around to it. Look at this. This is such a relief that it's doing something. The Solaris install is really cool just because it's so different from, you know, Windows or Linux or whatever. And here we go. We are actually getting into the installer. All this stuff can be predetermined in the JumpStart server with configuration files. And you can actually do like a headless install. You kick it off and then come back and it'll just be done. I might have to explore that someday. I never choose the right terminal. I think I'm in an X term. Yeah, that seems fine. And off we go. We are going to get this installed. It knows about the network interfaces. I'm going to breeze through this. I have plenty of videos where I do this in a little more detail, and I'll be back when we hopefully have a fresh copy of Solaris 10 installed. I definitely chose the wrong terminal because I can't make any selections properly. And yeah, oh man, I'm in trouble. I might have to restart the whole thing and choose the VT terminal or something. And we're back. It is a 25-minute ordeal to get from netboot to here. So don't want to make any mistakes. So last time I chose 12, the Xterm emulator. That was a bad idea. Someone commented a long time ago that I should be using PC console. Maybe I'll have to try that, but I know for sure if I use the VT100, which is usually a safe bet, it should get us where we need to be. It's not going to be perfect. I think it looks funny sometimes, but hopefully this will get me through it and I'll be back. Yeah, so now I can use the F2 keys to continue. That didn't work in Xterm mode. I had to do escape 2 and it was a huge mess. Now here's something interesting. Because I'm using Solaris 10 now, we can use the ZFS file system because it fully supports that. And I'm just going to make one massive pool, I think, ZFS pool, hopefully with some redundancy. It's only using one disk as the size of the pool. Wonder if I'm going to regret that. I am. I'm not going to do that. I'm only going to use 2 of the disks for my pool. Begin installation. And there it goes, configuring the disks. Okay. This is a site for sore eyes, the Solaris console terminal installer with its little progress bar. We are finally installing Solaris on this machine. Another 30 minutes or so later, Solaris 10 software installation succeeded. It's off finishing up some stuff. And yeah, now it's going to reboot, and hopefully we are presented with Solaris 10. It's trying to boot from the disk. I'm nervous. I've been working on this for many hours. It was probably 20 minutes of video for you, and last night and this morning and now this evening for me. Looking good. SunOS release 5.10, aka Solaris 10. I can never remember when it asked me to set a password. You must set the root password the first time you boot into the OS or something like that. We'll find out. Got a warning on one of the drives about reducing sync transfer rate. Not all those drives were identical. Maybe that's what's going on there. One might be slightly slower or something. And you can see it knows its host name is V440, of course. That's what's so cool about the JumpStart server. You can configure a ton of stuff, and the OS kind of sucks it up and configures itself as it installs. So you could do like a whole data center worth from your one JumpStart server and not have to, you know, do this for every single one. That's the whole point. All right, this is our first boot of the OS, so we're doing things like keyboard layout, and it's going to create a host key public-private pair for us. That makes sense. There we go. We are setting the root password. All right, we are so close. Here we are. Root, fatal error reset, slave timeout. What? This seems like a hardware problem. So I was typing my password and I got it wrong and I started pressing backspace. And then one of the CPUs became really unhappy. And now we're in a debug prompt. Okay. I think we can get out of here with go. No. We're going to need to do a restart. So I did a # to get back to the ALOM console. This is another reason this is a nice thing to have. And we're going to do a reset, which is going to reboot the system. And we're going to try again. And I'm still at the ALOM, so I'm going to go over to the console. This is the OK prompt, and as the machine starts up, it's going to spit out its post stuff. We might have to turn on more aggressive post tests. What I just saw there kind of implies like a memory issue or something. I think I've used this machine with the same exact CPU memory configuration and successfully ran Solaris. I mean, you saw me do that earlier today, so hopefully just a fluke and we can do a little restart here and get back into Solaris. OK prompt is up, and you can see we're in diagnostic mode obdiag/normal. I think there's more aggressive ones, like I was saying. Now, with Solaris installed on one of the drives, we can just issue a boot, and it should attempt to go off and find, you know, the root disk or whatever. I don't know if that's the right word. And it'll boot into Solaris again, and hopefully we can log in this time. The good news is we've gotten past the software issue, I think, and we might just have a good old-fashioned hardware issue to deal with. It's not like catastrophic, because we can boot, and you can see we're trying to get into SunOS. That is really weird and concerning. Well, this time we're in, but now I don't trust this thing. We'll see. In the future, we're going to do a lot more with this machine, and we'll learn pretty quickly if it's got some hardware problems, and we'll sort them out as we go. But Solaris is here. We've done it. Let's see what the disk situation is. Pretty sure we're using 2 of our drives, and I'm assuming they're mirrored. Let me go see if I can see what the installer set up. Let's do a zpool status rpool. Rpool is the name of the ZFS pool. A ZFS pool is, in ZFS parlance, the combined capacity of drives, basically, and they can be in different configurations. So you can combine them all, and if you lose one drive, you lose everything. You can combine them all, and they can be mirroring, so you can lose one drive, and you're okay. And here we are. They are in mirror mode, which means hard drive 0 and 1, I'm guessing, 2 bottom drives in the machine. One of those can die, and we'll be okay, which is pretty exciting. And I need to get in here and configure SendMail to shut up. But anyway, we did it. We did it. We've installed Solaris on the V440 with a JumpStart server. I think this is the longest video I've ever made, so at least we had a successful outcome. My personal goal was to be able to set up a JumpStart server connected with the RetroRack network, that 10.0 network. We succeeded there, and we did get Solaris 10 on the V440. In the future, I have big plans for that thing. I'd like to explore era-appropriate enterprise-level software, web servers, identity management, that sort of thing that might have been running on this, databases, starting with Sun's offering that they branded as Sun 1 between 2002 and 2003. This is a utterly confusing pile of software and services Sun provided, web servers, identity management, and that sort of thing. I've been utterly fascinated with the Sun 1 branding, period, of 02 and 03. That's why I was so hell-bent on getting Solaris 8 or 9 on there. I'm not sure if Solaris 10 is going to work with that stuff, but it might, and we're going to find out in the future. Not much more to say. We racked up the V440. It's got Solaris 10 installed. Hopefully that hardware issue we saw doesn't rear its head later. It's been sitting over there for about an hour running just fine. Hasn't had any issue, so hopefully that was a fluke. As always, thank you so much for watching, especially a long one like this. I'm a huge fan of long-form content. In fact, going over an hour is a huge milestone for me personally. I love watching long videos that allow the person to go into a sufficient amount of depth, and you learn a bunch of stuff and you get to follow along. Those are the videos I aspire to make, and I hope that this is one of them for you. If you'd like to support the channel and you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I'd really like to hit 75,000 subscribers by the end of this year, and I think I'm at 55,000, so I've got some work to do. I've also got a Patreon where I occasionally post behind-the-scenes type videos, little previews of what I'm working on, and early release videos. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.